6, a helping hand with your land.
Neil from Essex here with one of the very first Kubota R430 wheel loaders. Gonna walk you around this machine, show you some of its quirks and features, then we're gonna take it for a drive. When we're talking about a model, it's always good to know kind of its placement within a product range. If you go back historically here over the last number of years, Kubota has always had two wheel loader models. The prior generation, it was the R520 and the R420. Some here about 2 years ago or so, those two models got updated. When they came out, they grew a little bit. They got bigger, and we came out with the R630 and the R530. Those are both significantly larger machines than this, and this R430 comes back into the model range below those two. It is the size and probably shares a lot of the same underpinnings as the R420 before it. So it's an overall smaller wheel loader than what would be sitting on dealer lots today. The machine here that we just unloaded hasn't even been set up yet. So normally you'd have a large ballast weight sitting on the back of the machine here. You see these 4 points. Normally we'd put a 1,500 pound weight on the back of this that really gives this machine some really strong lift capacity. This is up in skid loader type capacity, way beyond what most small tractors are. Also can be equipped back here. You see this hydraulic line is a backhoe. Believe it or not, you can put backhoes on these machines, and it would be what's called a side shift backhoe that can actually slide left to right on the back of the machine. They're not a very common option, but are absolutely fantastic machines for grave digging and cemetery work. Very nimble machine, easy to get around. With that side shift backhoe, makes it really efficient to dig grave sites. So you see a lot of the old ones floating around out there doing that, and that is coming back again. The 530 and 630 that we've got now do not have that mount for the backhoe. In order to access the engine of the R430, we've got a little latch right back down here underneath that we pull, and the seat raises. Now, if we go up here into the engine compartment, you'll find there's a little turbocharged 3-cylinder engine, and this engine's got one really unique thing about it for most Kubota products. In all the other Kubota machinery, their engines are equipped with a DPF, a diesel particulate filter, over 26 horsepower and under 75 in that range that the EPA requires, in order to capture the soot coming out of the engine. About 3/4 of the machines on the market use that DPF, and it's very, very common. It's not something we have a whole lot of trouble with, but that type of emission system, well, all emission systems really, but that one in particular, really works best when it's hot. When the machine is running at high revs and it's working and it's generating a hot exhaust, DPFs work great. A wheel loader, though, doesn't tend to operate that way. It runs at lower RPMs a lot of the time when it's just out, running around shuttling things back and forth. Kubota, though, being a major engine company, has always offered both types of engines. A lot of guys think of Kubota as the DPF company, but they're an engine company fundamentally, and they make both DPF and the other style of engine called a dock-only engine. So this is actually a Kubota dock-only engine. It does exist, they are for real, and this is the first piece of Kubota equipment that's running rum, because in this application, the engineers are telling us that that makes the most sense. So up here in the business end of the R430, we have the boom, and you'll notice this is a similar setup that you see on most wheel loaders. This is called a Z-bar linkage right here, and the way that it pushes the bucket out and tips it. But we're going to talk about the capacities of this machine. So an R430 has a rated operating capacity, which is defined as 50% of the tip load, the point at which the machine is going to tip forward, of 2,300 pounds. The cab variant with that extra ballast and stuff behind it adds about an extra 100 pounds on top of that. If you go and you compare that number to other types of equipment that's out there, you'll find that falls into the range that you'll find most skid loaders. Easily able to do a lot of those same kind of tasks, right? Mucking spaces, carrying things around, and that kind of stuff. Looking specifically in Kubota's product line, the capacity of these machines would fall between the SSV 65 and the SSV 75. Price tags, if you go through and you compare a like-equipped SSV to a wheel loader, the wheel loader is going to run about 10% more money or so. It's within spitting distance in a lot of ways of a lot of wheeled skid loaders. Now, from an operator's perspective, if you've taken time and you've run these machines before, skid loaders, as far as they've come in comfort, you know, with nice seats and nice controls and comfortable cabs and those kinds of things, fundamentally aren't the nicest machines to run, particularly if you're on asphalt and those kinds of things. They tend to buck around and they don't have great visibility out of them at a lot of times. Skid loaders as a piece of equipment are something that's fairly unique to the United States. We run a lot of them here, but in other parts of the world, they're actually pretty hard to come by. Other countries, Europe in particular, tend to use a lot more wheel loaders and telehandlers in places that we would be using skid loaders. I think there's a lot of sense to that, and you'll show you here in a little while what it's like to operate one of these machines from the operator's perspective. It's an easy machine to drive, it's very easy to see out of, it doesn't buck back and forth, its turning radiuses are really good. So if you have an application where you need skid steer-like capacities, but don't necessarily need the small footprint of the skid steer, right? This thing is obviously longer. A wheel loader might be worth considering. It's overall a much nicer machine to run, and its operating costs, in our experience, can be a lot lower depending on what your applications are. So I did a video on an R430 that we run here ourselves, probably about a year ago, comparing it to a skid loader that we used to run, and our operating costs for running the wheel loaders have been much, much lower because of our tire wear. Running skid loaders and stuff on asphalt tends to really wear their tires down, where these machines, because of their articulation, will have very, very little tire wear because they run really efficiently. So you might have a little bit higher upfront purchase price, but if your application allows it, you might find the wheel loader being a much nicer machine to run and costing you a little bit less money over its lifetime. One place the wheel loader does come up short of my skid steer replacement concept is in the auxiliary hydraulics. So normally on this machine, we're gonna go and pin a hydraulic skid steer coupler here and power it off of these outlets here at the front. Our shop machines here that we run around, we actually tee these things so that we can use the hydraulics in order to test implements, sweepers, and that kind of stuff if we need to in the shop. But that's where we kind of run into our limitations. So this machine is going to deliver around 12 gallons a minute of hydraulic flow out those outlets, and you're going to find even the smallest of skid loaders being in the 18 or 20 range. So while we can certainly do the loader type tasks or operate simple hydraulic cylinders with the hydraulics that are on here, we don't have enough flow in order to be the true tool carrier that a skid loader or a track loader can be. So things like Harley rakes or brooms and that kind of stuff, you don't have quite the flow that you need to really run those things like you can on a skid steer. I don't have any specific feature-y things to say about this, but just walking around the machine and looking at some of the quality of construction things that you notice when you're around equipment all the time, there's some really nice work on here. The pivot down here and those castings and the cleanliness of the welds and the bends are just really, really nicely done. You'll see these machines pivot here for their steering, but they can also twist as well. So when it comes to contouring really irregular areas, the thing is definitely going to be well planted. And if you follow the hydraulic lines and stuff up here into the valve body that's used on the front for the lifting, if you ever had a need to, say, replace a hose or get in to service something, things are very clean and very easy to get to. So operator's experience, right? We're gonna take a quick drive around the parking lot here and show you some of the ways that these things can be actually really nimble. If we reach down here and just crank the key, start it up, I've got a foot throttle down here to use on the floor for my speed, and brakes down here to the left and the right. These two are both tied together. When the machine brakes, it brakes both sides together. Little button here to turn off my parking brake, and then I've got a left-hand shuttle over here that I can push forward. Now, first time I got on here, I grabbed my turn signals over here on the right. The turn signals also look like a little shuttle. So if we put that guy into forward and just step on the gas, these will start to creep forward really slow and predictably. Wheel loaders don't have any kind of clutching or gears or anything like that. They're all hydrostatically driven. When you want to shuttle into reverse, you just reach over here and pull reverse. And we're going backwards. And we're going forwards. And we're going backwards. Right? Really easy to move the thing around. And all your speed is just governed by that foot throttle. One cool thing that you'll find on these is these brakes down here. So when you pull up to something, I can step on the brakes, which will stop the machine, but continue to keep my foot on the throttle. You hear this? Normally that's something you wouldn't want to do in another tractor or anything, right? Because you'd think that you're driving against the brakes. When you step on the brakes, you're actually disengaging the transmission. So when you go up to, say, a pile of dirt and you want to use your loader, you can stay on the throttle in order to have that speed to move your loader up and down. darn kids were moving the lock buttons. Right, so I can stay on the gas. So if I go between, back up, come forward like I'm going into my pile of dirt, I'm gonna keep my foot on the throttle and roll to a smooth stop there using my brakes and still have the engine RPMs up to give me that hydraulic flow to have a fast loader cycle. So that's a cool way that these brakes work that's different than what a traditional tractor is. So for a machine that can lift over a metric ton and get around as quick as it does, it doesn't sacrifice maneuverability. So I'm gonna run down this aisle here in our parking lot where we've got all of our rental equipment. And you can see how the articulation of these things keeps them rather maneuverable. Now granted, I don't have a bucket on, right? So that's gonna take some space off of my turning radius, but you can see I can nearly make that entire circle right there inside that line of equipment without even having to make a 3-point turn. And if I did, you know, I just shuttle the other direction and change directions really quickly on the fly. So very nimble machines. One of the biggest applications for a machine like this is in transporting materials around, right? If you're a landscape yard moving mulch and you need to shuttle back and forth between a pile and a pickup truck, or you're a farmer moving round bales to the field, you need to be able to clip along. So this has got a 2-range transmission, and in high, she can cook along pretty good. So that's a little bit of the Kubota R430 wheel loader, a new small entry in Kubota's wheel loader line. If you're in the market for a piece of equipment like this and we can help, give us a call at Messick's. We're also available for any parts and service needs you may have. Number is 800-222-3373 or online at messicks.com. We're gonna be more Doug DeMuro like to see if somebody gets the Doug reference. Of that, they kind of think that the Kubota is a DPF company, but they're screwed that up. Okay, and we're going backwards, and we're going forwards, and we're going backwards, and we're going forwards, and we're going backwards, and we're going forwards, and we're going backwards.